Here are the headlines for this Sunday morning, the 16th.
Television news has made remarkable strides since the first network newscast in 1948. From the viewer's first look coast to coast on See It Now with Edward R. Murrow.
This is an old team trying to learn a new trade. We're impressed with the importance of this medium. We shall hope to learn to use it and not to abuse it.
From the Vietnam War to the war in Iraq.
The only rational way out then will be to negotiate.
How soon will American troops be out of Iraq? We'll ask the U.S. Commanding General.
To the digital transition, traditional to new media, electronic journalism has changed drastically in recent years and will change even more in the years ahead. It means journalists must adjust and stations must find a way to make money in order to survive. In this report, we will answer some questions on what this new technology means for the journalist and the consumer. With reporters having to do more, can we improve standards, maintain integrity, and find the best ways to serve the audience? Or is technology outpacing the values established for TV news? For Tennessee Matters, I'm Terry Likes.
When calamity occurs, when television does especially good work, it seems like it raises its credibility with the public.
You want to get the story, you want to get it right, you want to get it fast, and you want to do the best possible job you can on that.
Some viewers question whether journalists really do the best possible job. The reality is reporters today do more with less resources. Al Tompkins is a former news director for Nashville's WSMV-TV and currently is group leader for broadcasting and online for the Poynter Institute for Media Studies, a think tank for mid-career journalists.
I think there's a future for broadcast news. I don't think we're anywhere near the end of broadcast news, but it's possible that we won't be doing what we're doing now. It's possible that 10 years, 15 to 20 years from now, we won't be doing what we think of as television news.
In an article published in American Journalism Review called Collaborate or Die, some local television stations are joining forces to cover the news. The article says new alliances may not save local TV news, but they could keep some newsrooms afloat long enough to reinvent what they do and how they do it. At WUSA-TV, the Gannett flagship in Washington, all reporters and photographers are now considered multimedia journalists, a trend Russ Mitchell, a correspondent and anchor for CBS News, sees at many media outlets across the country.
You're going to be shooting the story, reporting the story, editing the story, getting the story on the air, on television, on radio, getting it on the web. The journalist of tomorrow is going to have to do about 20 things if they want to survive in this business in the future.
Dr. Roy Moore is the Dean of the College of Mass Communication at Middle Tennessee State University. He says the future of news is going to be affected by newer technology much more so than in the past.
The state of news is such now that almost anyone who has fairly inexpensive equipment can in effect become his or her own journalist, and that is changing how the commercial stations and the public broadcasting stations now cover news.
A Radio TV Digital News Association Hofstra University survey shows the number of social networking initiatives at television stations soared over the last year, with 76% responding stations integrating social media on their websites. CBS's Russ Mitchell says people can go anywhere these days with mobile media and have thousands of information choices, so content is going to have to be king for stations and networks to distinguish themselves.
Reporters, news directors, executive producers are going to have to work hard to do something different to get people to tune in, because there's going to be a lot of clutter out there, and a lot of people are going to have a lot of choices, a lot more even than they have today.
In an article on National Public Radio's website entitled Bias or Balance, media wrestle with faltering trust. Last year, the Pew Research Center found an historic low level of trust in the media for just that reason. Bias is virtually assumed by the audience. This has changed from the days when the audience considered Walter Cronkite to be the most trusted man in America. Marcy McGinnis worked with Cronkite in her early days at CBS. She later rose to become the CBS News Senior Vice President for news coverage before leaving to become an Associate Dean at Stony Brook University.
Cover the news, cover the facts, get them out to the public, and, don't hype it. You don't need to hype it. The news is unbelievably interesting and exciting in itself. So the idea that you would twist it or turn it to fit your opinion or to give your opinion about it, I think, is something that he would be somewhat appalled at.
Merv Block worked as a writer for ABC and NBC and also worked with Cronkite at CBS.
I don't see any Walter Cronkites anchoring today, and I don't see any Walter Cronkites on the horizon. So I think his departure is a great loss to journalism.
Some say news outlets can build trust only if they admit their biases. Others state the opposite, that winning back the public's trust requires them to stick to the facts. In a crowded world of news featuring traditional, tabloid, and talk, have the lines blurred? Here again, CBS's Russ Mitchell.
I think the public will look at a TMZ and a CBS and an NBC or an ABC, and in some cases not really see the difference. Not because there's not a difference there, it's just that the audience has become so inundated with all these other outlets.
The Huffington Post offers a new study out of the University of Maryland showing students are addicted to social media, and smartphones deliver their drug. Dr. Roy Moore of Middle Tennessee State University says this has changed how we train future journalists.
It's going to be very, very critical that they not only be really good writers and good reporters and good journalists, but they're also going to have to be pretty sharp technicians as well.
The Federal Communications Commission new chairman has stated, with each passing day, communication devices and networks become more essential to the fabric of the daily lives of all Americans. Stephen Waldman, a senior advisor to the FCC chairman, is working on a Future of Media project.
National journalism is in a slightly better position because there'll be a handful of big national media institutions that will survive the shakeout. People are really worried about local, and there's some concern about foreign coverage as well because that's so expensive to do.
Author James Fallows wrote an article on how to save the news. The three pillars of the new online business model are distribution, engagement, and monetization. That is, getting news to more people and more people to news-oriented sites, making the presentation of news more interesting, and converting these larger and more strongly committed audiences into revenue through both subscription fees and ads. NBC correspondent Bob Dotson is optimistic this model can work.
If you want to come to Nashville and you just want to see their newspapers for 3 days, something will come up and say, well, it's going to cost you 14 cents a day. You don't have to do cabling, with 140 channels. And you don't have to fill anything out because it's already in your iPad. So, much as the transition from broadcast television to cable, people got used to paying a little bit of money to get a Showtime or, basic cable or whatever. I think we're finally going to get a revenue stream back for the parts of journalism that aren't sexy but are necessary.
In an article for the American Journalism Review on the YouTube factor, former CBS and CNN correspondent and current president of NewsLab, Deborah Potter, says more than 90% of local TV stations have video on their websites, but Potter says less than a third of those sites make a profit.
It is amazing to me that television on the web could be any kind of web outlets. It's very hard to quickly identify that they're television because they're not using video very well. And when you consider that video is the one thing that really distinguishes them from other news providers, you'd think they'd want to put it front and center, but generally they don't. Now, that isn't to say that some stations aren't doing that. They are, but not as much as you would think.
Some project in the future there won't be hubs of news such as the New York Times or CNN. Dr. Sabril Bennett, an associate professor teaching journalism and new media at Belmont University, does not agree, but admits there are a variety of ways traditional news outlets must learn to monetize in the new era of media.
Because you're so beholden to profit sharing and shareholders, etc., we can't innovate. And people are arguing about innovation in news right now. Most news is not innovative because you can't afford to innovate because you're busy trying to pay the bills. True innovation happens outside of money.
Bennett says the news of the future is going to be collaborative.
The benefit of your established entities should be aggregation, providing a platform where people can come together. In addition, give me the context of the information, give me the historical links to the information. Newspapers in particular have deep archives. If they would pull out those archives and make the connections, they'd make themselves more relevant. News as it stands today will not be the same tomorrow. The way it's going to formulate really is going to depend on whether you're in an organization with leaders or managers. Managers control, leaders lead.
In an article about the legacy of Joseph Pulitzer, Carl Sessions Stepp of the University of Maryland says the goal today is to still use Pulitzer's prize-winning formula to raise standards, galvanize the audience with diversion and depth, and leap boldly forward. With that in mind, It helps to remember what host Jack Perkins said as he introduced the biography of Edward R. Murrow.
In these days of paparazzi and ambush interviews and tabloids, serious reporters might well ask themselves one question. What would Murrow do?
Technology changes from film to video, analog to digital, and old media to new. But content remains at the core of what journalists do. No matter what the delivery system, journalists must remain true to their principles, to hold the powerful accountable, provide a voice to the voiceless, seek the truth and be fair, accurate, and honest, yet compassionate. I'm Terry Likes. You're listening to Tennessee Matters from the Tennessee Radio Network.